As a career detective, this case is very unique. Little did I know that this would lead to one of the most fascinating cold case homicides that I'd ever been a part of.
How did this case begin for you?
So on December 3rd of 2017, the Sheriff's Department received a 911 call from a homeowner reporting that their family dog brought back a human skull.
It came back with a human skull.
Yes. And it had an obvious gunshot wound to the back of the head. We kind of organized a grid search and within minutes located the clandestine grave right off in this area. So Peter, this is the area right up here.
I'll follow you. Now this is quite a thicket, isn't it?
It's a little thicket. If you see this little indention in the soil right here, that's where the skeletal remains were found.
We had a very circumstantial case. We literally have human bones, human remains, with a gunshot wound to the head. And at that point, is this a murder? Is this a suicide?
We have a model of a human skull. Can you show us where that wound was?
It's pretty much towards the back rear of the skull.
When you look at these scattered bones, are they telling you a story?
Yes, it tells me that it's most likely the story of murder. We were reviewing missing persons cases throughout the Midwest, but nothing was definitive to who this victim was.
When the cases come to
The DNA Doe Project.
everything's already been exhausted. Genetic genealogy is the last resort. So we use the DNA to look at the matches. And we can build family trees that way and figure out the identities of people. In this case, that person is Gary Albert Herbst.
The victim, Gary, was from Scott County, Minnesota. We located the home where Gary had last lived. Some of the neighbors who still lived in the neighborhood had reported remembering some activity back in 2013 that they found suspicious.
It's pouring down rain. It's probably 11:30 at night, pitch black dark.
Something catches your eye across at the Herbst house. Chad, what do you see?
I see the neighbors scrubbing the floors. I see them scrubbing the walls.
We saw them bringing out black garbage bags. They eventually brought out a rolled up carpet. I didn't know what I was looking at. I had no idea. And I turned to Chad and I was like, what is going on? And Chad looked at me and he said, Kaya, I think they finally killed him.
It was in June of 2020 when Linda Dane learned the disturbing circumstances of how her long-lost brother Gary's skull had been found by a dog in rural Barron County, Wisconsin.
Yeah, it's kind of a eerie type thing to think of, but it still led to finding out what happened, the truth.
Linda says Gary, who was 57 when he went missing, was a loner with a difficult personality who rarely saw his own extended family, which is why pictures that exist of him are from his younger years, seen here with his wife Connie.
He could be stubborn, he could be crabby.
It had been years since Linda and Gary had spoken, and in 2013, she learned from Connie that he had vanished, walking out on her and their son Austin, seen here as a teenager.
What did you think of that?
I was shocked. I didn't know what to think.
Linda says she found it strange that Connie had not reported his disappearance to police.
And it's like, okay, did you file a missing persons report? Did you report it? Did you do anything? And they did nothing.
What was her reason for not reporting that her husband was missing?
She didn't give us a reason.
At Linda and her family's urging, Connie filed this missing persons report with the Elko Newmarket Police Department in Minnesota, where the Herbsts lived. In the report, Connie said Gary grabbed a suitcase and left in an older gray Honda vehicle, but she claimed she did not get a look at who was driving. 6 years would pass before an investigative genetic genealogist, Robin Espenson, would be able to construct a family tree that led to identifying the skull.
We knew that we had found the identity of our doe as Gary Albert Herbst.
Gary Herbst was originally born in north central Wisconsin. We located family members of his in south central Minnesota.
That's when Detective Jeff Nelson from the Barron County Sheriff's Office tracked down Austin and Connie at the retirement community where they both worked.
I think it was a little bit of a surprise to them because we actually found out that both Connie Herbst and her son Austin worked at a nursing home. We basically walked in unannounced and met with both Connie and Austin.
When you told Connie that you had found her missing husband, likely had found him, was she excited about the news or was she stoic about it?
Both of them were very stoic. Never even commented, well, at least we know it's him. It's like they just glassed over it.
Brent Peterson, a special agent with the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, joined Jeff Nelson to interview Connie.
She was not uncooperative. She was just trying to be helpful. At least that was the appearance.
Did you get into the issue about why she didn't report her husband as being missing?
Yeah, that was a red flag from the beginning.
Here's Connie's answer about why she didn't report it.
Because he left on his own. I said I didn't think I had to.
Connie told investigators she wasn't surprised Gary walked out on them because he had a troubled lifestyle.
She described Gary as a drug user. He would use drugs and spend all their money. He just was described to us as just being generally kind of a volatile, angry, unpleasant person.
How was he with Austin?
Up until the age of 10, great. But at the age of 10, when Gary would start his yelling and screaming at me,
Yeah.
Austin would step in between.
Okay.
Don't you yell at my mom.
Did he ever hate you in the 30-plus years you guys were married?
Once or twice.
Yeah.
One time he hit me pretty hard and black and blue in my shoulder. The other time he actually hit me, he pushed me and I broke my toe.
In his interview, Austin told investigators his father had become enraged the day he left, and later learned he had stolen $5,000 in cash and his mother's wedding ring.
I heard him banging around in the master bedroom. I'm like, okay, what's going on? Looked in, he was packing a suitcase. He's like, I'm leaving. And yeah, he got in, some guy pulled up, picked him up.
Connie told investigators she was at the library that day and remembered getting a frantic call from her son.
He was, Dad left. Dad left. He got in a vehicle with somebody.
Investigators soon realized that Connie may have lied to them. Why? Because in her missing persons report, Connie had said she was home when Gary walked out.
We're suspicious of their stories right away. So there was a lot of things, this didn't match up.
Connie added to investigators' suspicions when she gave yet another new detail.
The .40 caliber gun was gone. And that was mine.
Connie had never mentioned Gary had stolen her gun when she first reported him missing.
So there's a lot of oddities that she's telling.
Had she said something in your mind that was particularly incriminating?
I wouldn't say incriminating, but I strongly felt she had certainly knowledge of his murder. I figured she had some form of involvement.
So investigators redoubled their efforts to try to learn more.
So there's working pieces going on.
Several months passed before investigators were ready to interview Connie and Austin a second time. This time, they dug deeper into Connie's claims of abuse.
So, your mom talked of some abuse issues in the family, how you were very protective of her.
Yeah.
And we understand that.
But it was more the fact that I hated when he would sit there and yell at her, and it would upset her.
And the more investigators questioned Austin, the more he began to blame his father for his own demise.
Yeah, he was an angry guy and stuff, but I never expected that to get to the point where someone would want to kill him.
Directing attention toward a mysterious man with tattoos he says his father drove away with.
Do you remember a guy with a black shirt and tattoos?
That's about it. That's as far as I can get, and then I got a really uneasy sense about it. That was it.
Gary Herbst went missing in 2013. A dog found his skull in 2017. And by June of 2020, investigators suspected his own family, his wife Connie and son Austin Herbst, were somehow involved in Gary's disappearance and murder.
There's some follow-up questions and information we need to gather to try to piece all this together.
And during their second interview, they consented to a polygraph.
The investigators from Wisconsin had arranged with the FBI. They both agreed to take polygraphs.
Lie detector tests are generally not admissible in court, but investigators will use them as a tool to judge an individual's credibility.
What were the results?
Connie did not show any signs of deception, but Austin did.
An investigator from the FBI confronted Austin.
So I'm very convinced, but you clearly know what happened.
I don't. I'm telling you.
Austin, you can't walk away here saying you don't know anything, because you clearly know something.
No.
Whatever it is, you gotta tell me.
I suspected that the guy in the truck wasn't exactly friendly. The look I got from him, looked sketchy.
Either you're involved with your mom in killing your father, or you're involved with someone else in killing your father.
I'm not involved with it. I'm just going to tell you, saying my mom's involved with that is pretty out of this world.
Detectives say Austin continued to draw the investigators' attention toward the man with tattoos he says picked up his father that day.
Describe what you're talking about when you talk about the look of him.
Tats came out with a black A-shirt that was all ripped up.
Doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense.
The first interview, he recalls his dad getting into a vehicle and leaving. Then that changed to he remembered some heavily tattooed man that looked, in his words, to be some sort of criminal that was the driver of a vehicle that his dad got into. So the story changed and morphed each time you talked with him.
Investigators suspected Austin's story was pure fiction.
I just find way too many inconsistencies in your stories. I mean, with your story, with your mom's story.
And did you feel that the story was rehearsed?
Certainly.
That he was trying to recall a script?
Script.
But a feeling isn't evidence, and investigators had no choice but to let Connie and Austin go. Next, they headed to the family's old neighborhood and former home.
Ironically, to a T, all the neighbors remembered Gary very well.
Detective Nelson says that to a person, they described Gary as a mean, horrible human being.
We repeatedly heard the term, the biggest that you'll ever meet. If he was mad at a neighbor, apparently he had a pipe organ, and he would set up big speakers in the windows, and he would blast pipe organ music into the neighbor's house. In the wintertime, when he would get mad at a neighbor, he would take his snowblower over and purposely blow and fill people's yards up in the middle of the night.
With snow?
With snow.
He was just an evil person.
Neighbors Kaya and Chad Cramel's house was right behind the Herbst house. They say Gary often yelled at their two daughters and was caught secretly recording them on video.
I looked in their back window, you could see the red light from the camera on. And I walked out there and I could see the camera and Gary behind the camera.
This is a video camera.
Video camera, like camcorder. And he was just staring at me blatantly, like on purpose, wanting to, you know, almost show me up and be like, yeah, I'm recording. And I sat there and I was raising my hand like, are you kidding me?
Chad filed an incident report with police.
It sounds like this has a psychological component to it, like he was messing with your mind.
Absolutely. I feel like he wanted power and he wanted everyone to know that he had that power. He most definitely tried to exercise that power by messing with people, neighbors.
Another neighbor, Jason Grimm, says he experienced that firsthand when Gary complained about the time he was snowblowing.
He came out and started screaming and shouting at me, telling me I was going to flood his basement.
Did you feel like he was a little dangerous?
I never feared him, just surely because it was all bark, no bite.
Did you feel he was a dangerous man?
Absolutely.
And did you the same way?
Absolutely.
And when investigators interviewed Dee Hamlin, the new owner of the house where Gary and his family lived, they learned something that would confirm their suspicions about Connie and Austin.
Over in this area right here, before the closets were put in, somewhere over here, there was a big red stain.
When investigators canvassed Gary Herbst's old neighborhood, they uncovered a trove of new clues from the time around his disappearance.
People didn't like him, were afraid, because he was very confrontational.
Neighbors Chad and Kaya Crammel recalled a storm.
Thunder, lightning, everything. Like, it was crazy.
And unusual activity in Gary's backyard.
It was maybe midnight-ish, and we looked out the window.
I see a truck backed in the backyard.
The truck was pulled right up to the sliding glass door, which we knew was super strange because Gary was very particular with his yard. He did not like anything out of order.
Chad and Kaya told investigators they remembered seeing Austin and Connie scrubbing the floors in the middle of the night.
You could see directly from those windows into their house.
Absolutely.
And loading large garbage bags into Gary's truck.
They were also carrying out a carpet or some sort of rug and also throwing it in the back of the truck. So we were watching the scene and I turned to Chad and I was like, what is going on? And Chad looked at me and he said, Kaya, I think they finally killed him.
And did the two of you ever think, well, we should share what we've witnessed with the police?
Absolutely not.
No, and matter of fact,
he was horrible.
And soon after that night, they say Connie and Austin seemed completely different.
It was good. It was fun to see them actually happy.
A few weeks later, their neighbors saw them setting up a yard sale.
So everybody started filtering over there, myself included, and we were looking at all of the things that they had for sale.
And what was for sale?
Men's clothing, men's shoes, there were tools, ammo boxes.
Now, did you ask her, where's Gary?
Yes, and the answer was that he didn't want to be married anymore, and he left.
Jason says he scored a bargain.
I did. Bought a riding lawn tractor.
Neighbors say Austin and Connie began happily walking the neighborhood, offering up baked cookies.
And do you think his disappearance in some ways liberated their lives?
Absolutely. Their steps were lighter. It was nice not to have them around.
All of a sudden, Connie and Austin, they would be out in the yard stopping and greeting people, where none of that happened prior to the date that Gary allegedly left.
The next break in the case came when investigators obtained a search warrant for the former Herbst house and notified the new owner, Dee Hamlin, that they would be bringing in a cadaver dog along with her handler, police officer Dan Moldenhauer, to see if she could detect the scent of human remains.
So this officer said there may have been someone killed inside the house, and they wanted a dog to come in to see if they picked up any odor
exactly.
of death.
I go, absolutely.
When you got that call and you brought Radar out here, this is the very house you came to, correct?
Correct.
Radar is the cadaver dog who searched Dee's house. She came back to the scene along with her handler to show us what she did that day.
Boy, Radar wants to get inside, I'll tell you.
Yep, and I follow her.
I was present when the dog originally came in. I was there for the first sniff around.
Hamlin says something in the garage caught Radar's attention.
Radar concentrated heavily against this wall and on the brick behind the drywall pieces and the boxes.
Radar, find it.
Radar's search continued inside the house.
Radar would run from space to space and room to room, and almost like he had a pattern. And then we went downstairs, and that's where he slowed down.
According to Radar's handler, the dog detected the odor of human remains around that red stain Dee had seen.
She went straight to this room, ignored every other thing else, came back, went along the wall, and then came to the corner where that closet door is.
That wasn't the only area that Radar was interested in.
She had a lot of odor here. I mean, she checked all the walls before she came back and sat.
So there was definitely a presence of some sort of material, the guess is blood, around this sliding door.
Yes.
Crime scene investigators tested the spots with luminol, which indicated the presence of blood in the areas where the cadaver dog alerted.
When you have the luminol literally lighting up, what is it suggesting to you?
Well, it's certainly consistent and corroborates what the neighbors saw. We believed Gary was most likely murdered inside that particular house.
That's when they called Connie and Austin in for a third interview.
So we went to your old house on Wagner Way and just had a look, trying to piece together Gary's kind of last movements. And there was some blood.
Okay.
Connie said Gary, who was a machinist, often worked on projects and sometimes accidentally cut himself.
Usually it's his fingers.
This blood that we're finding is a bit more significant than just a little cut on the finger.
Oh, that I wouldn't know.
Investigators also questioned Connie about what the neighbors reported seeing.
Some witnesses saw what they thought was a rolled up rug being loaded in the back of the pickup.
No, I don't know. We didn't have any carpet, just up in the living room.
Her body language was, to me, was like she was defeated.
Phil Naraki, a captain with the Scott County Sheriff's Office, was also present at the interrogation.
Like, as long as I can continue to deny everything, I'm going to be okay. But she didn't get rattled, very soft-spoken.
Did she sense she was in real trouble, do you think?
Yes. I think she knew at that point that all the evidence was starting to gather up against her and Austin.
Investigators continued to press Connie.
So it sounds like Gary was a little psychologically abusive with you guys.
Yeah.
What about physical abuse?
One time he hit me.
Yeah.
Not that I didn't probably deserve it, because I got pushed too far.
For Austin's interview, cameras were rolling as he was grilled by Detective Jeff Nelson.
Do you feel that he was the husband that he should have been to your mother?
No.
And you stepped in and intervened several times, did you not?
Yeah.
Okay. You became a protector.
Yeah.
Okay. Which I would have to believe culminated in July of 2013 when you took action to protect your mom. Did you pull the trigger and put the round in the back of your father's head?
But no matter how many times Austin was asked that question, he never answered it. Once again, Connie and Austin were allowed to leave the police station.
And that was a strategic plan that we had come up with, knowing full well that if we needed to arrest them, we'd be able to find them later.
Now, investigators believed they had enough evidence to bring the case to prosecutors.
There was some reluctance. There was no confession. It's simply a circumstantial case, albeit we felt it was a very good one.
And on November 19th, 2020, around 7 a.m., Connie, then 62 years old, and Austin, 26, were taken into custody.
I tell Austin that he is under arrest for the murder of his father.
The two would eventually be charged with second-degree murder.
Connie had already declined the final interview with us and had been taken away to the jail.
But this time, Austin was ready to explain everything to investigators.
Do you remember where you shot him?
Yeah.
And later to 48 Hours.
And what do you do with his body?
I sling him over my shoulder and I walk into the forest.
Was it you or your mom that pulled the trigger?
For more than 4 hours, Austin Herbst was grilled about his role in his father's murder.
What's it going to be, Austin? Was it you or your mom?
Did you get the gun, Austin? Yes or no? Is that fair to say that you think that you protected her and you feel that you protected her that day? Yes or no?
Finally, Austin broke.
He said something to the effect of, I might as well tell you what I did. I said, Austin, that's what we've been asking for.
On that day when my mom came home, he blew off the handle, so I grabbed the gun and ended the problem.
Austin would tell investigators all about what happened that day. And now, for the first time, he is sharing his story with 48 Hours.
My father, Gary Herbst, was vindictive to an extreme that I have never seen in anybody else. He was cruel, he was petty, he was violent.
Did you reach an age in which you came to fear your father, or you felt like you were walking on eggshells?
Very early. I'd say by 6, 7 years old, that fear was present.
Austin says the emotional road he traveled that led to killing his own father was filled with acts of violence and abuse beginning when he was a boy. Details he didn't share in earlier interviews with investigators.
He proceeded to put a cigarette out on my arm, and I screamed and cried and ran. And I did something wrong, picked me up by my throat and threw me down a flight of stairs.
Austin says his mother was treated even more brutally.
Terribly, unbelievably so. Physical abuse on a weekly, sometimes daily basis. Always demeaning, always negative.
Did you ever see a time in which he drew blood from your mother from striking her?
Yes. He punched her right in the face, pure black and blue the next day. She had blood leaking from her mouth.
Psychological abuse, physical abuse.
Yeah.
You swear on everything you believe in, and you're telling me the truth.
Absolutely.
Austin, just 19 years old when he murdered his father, recalls that tragic day, July 8th, 2013.
The start of the day seemed very normal to me.
Austin remembers playing video games that afternoon when his dad returned home from work.
Had he been drinking that day?
Yeah. He drank regularly. Around about, I'd say, I think it was 2 or 3 o'clock. My mom came home, and she and him got into an argument about money. There was yelling. I tried my best to protect her. I am a wall. I will not let this continue.
Austin says his mom went to the public library.
My father at this point was laying on the couch, half asleep. And as I walked out, I noticed that skirting was crumpled up. I lifted up the skirting and I saw the firearm.
It's a pistol.
Yes.
Austin says his father had never brought a gun into the living room before.
In my heart of hearts, I knew that my mother's life was in danger, and by extension, my own. It all just culminated like, oh my God, he's going to kill her. All these thoughts ran through my head almost instantaneously. And I reached underneath the couch, I grabbed the gun, I pointed at him, and I pulled the trigger. You know, it was surreal almost, right? Like, the bang went off, my hearing popped, and it was just immediately, there was almost like a numbness.
I've never asked this question in all my years on 48 Hours. What was it like to pick up that pistol, point it at your father's head, and pull the trigger?
It broke me. It changed who I am irrevocably. I can never be the person I was, or even the person I would have become had that never happened.
But that moment, are you anguished over what you had done? Are you horrified?
There was a level of relief, knowing that I would never again have to have that fear, having to worry about my mother's life, having to worry about my life.
Austin says he called his mother at the library and told her to come home. And how does your mom react to this scene?
Sort of the same way I did, sort of just stunned.
Austin says he placed his father's body, wrapped in a rug, in the trunk of their car. They drove into neighboring Wisconsin. What are you and your mom talking about?
We aren't. At that point, the adrenaline's still rushing. It's still fear.
About 2 hours later, Austin and his mom pulled onto a field next to a patch of trees. He says they dumped Gary's body at this spot and then fled.
I figured that wildlife would take care of the rest.
What do you mean, wildlife take care of the...
Bears, foxes, they would devour the body, the bones would be scattered. Nobody would know.
That seems a bit barbaric.
Absolutely. I was not in the state of mind that I ever want to revisit. I was at the lowest I'd ever been, both in my emotions and in my humanity.
We do have information that he was not a pleasant person to be around, but being an unpleasant person does not rise to the level of being a domestic abuser.
With no evidence, Austin acted in self-defense. Prosecutors Mike Groh and Sarah Wendorf said Austin and Connie would be charged with second-degree murder.
What Austin described as happening was not an emergency situation. It did not rise to a self-defense offense.
Your life, while he was sleeping there on the couch, was not under imminent threat. You didn't have to shoot him. This wasn't legally self-defense. This was murder.
Correct.
And as prosecutors prepared for trial, they questioned whether there was more to Connie's role in Gary's killing than Austin had admitted.
Do you at times wonder to yourself, could Connie have pulled that trigger?
As a prosecutor, of course, I wonder about that.
I shot my father because if I hadn't, I would have been dead. My mother would have been dead.
What are the options that his son could have done other than kill Gary?
He could have grabbed the gun and left the house and told the police what had been going on.
Prosecutor Mike Groh.
All of those things are possible and very doable, except shooting him in the head, which is the last thing that a civilized person would supposedly do.
Once Austin Herbst confessed to killing his father, he agreed to plead guilty to second-degree murder.
It was what we call a straight plea, which means there was no promises made by the state as to what you would get.
Connie Herbst pleaded guilty to aiding an offender, accomplice after the fact.
Austin said, yes, I was the one that killed my dad. And then that's when we decided Connie would be charged with the aiding an offender after the fact.
Without a trial, prosecutor Sarah Wendorf says there were many unanswered questions about Austin and Connie's claims of physical abuse.
We have never seen any information to suggest that there was any abuse that Gary had committed against Austin or his wife.
They never said anything until they were in trouble. And then they told these reasons why they were abused.
The prosecutors in this case say, well, there's no real evidence that any of this happened.
Of course. And I can't refute that. I can't refute that there is no evidence that occurred. It is all hearsay.
Austin told 48 Hours he and his mom had never reported abuse to the police, friends, or extended family members because they feared for their lives at the hands of Gary.
I've been told, if you try to have me arrested, if you try to flee, if you try to, go your own way, I will find you and kill you.
Another question for prosecutors involves Connie's whereabouts on the day of the murder.
You said that your mom was at the library at the time that your father was shot, correct?
Yes.
Well, prosecutors say investigators were never able to find evidence that that's true, that she was there. And they wonder if your mother was the one who killed your father, and that you, as her protector, have told a story where you're taking the responsibility for something that she did.
My mom would never allow me to take a fall like that if she had done that.
And I need to ask you that question. Did your mother, Connie, shoot and kill your father?
I'm telling you right now, on everything on hold, dear, my mother did not shoot my father.
Prosecutors said a potential motive for Gary's murder was hate, illustrated by how Austin left his father's corpse in these woods to be eaten.
That is inhumane.
Absolutely.
That is barbaric.
Inhumanity that, at the time, seemed to have left Austin overjoyed.
I experienced more happiness afterwards than I had for my entire 18 years of living with him.
You're having cookies with the neighbors while your father's corpse is being eaten by animals.
Yeah. It was a strange dichotomy. It actually brought me a sense of almost shame that my happiness is on the feet of the ultimate act of violence. It still makes me wonder what kind of person I am that could have happened.
At Austin Herbst's June 2021 sentencing hearing at the Scott County District Court in Minnesota, prosecutors asked that he be sentenced to 30 years in prison.
I made it clear to the judge that he deserved the highest sentence because of the callous way that he was killed and the body was treated.
But Judge Caroline Lennon said she found Austin's claims believable. In her ruling, she said, "I find it credible that you believed that he was going to kill your mom," and later said Austin felt an underlying obligation to protect his mother. He was sentenced to 12 years, 6 months, and will be eligible for release in 2029.
It's horrendous because if we allow that kind of justice to go, nobody's safe because they'll say that I have been abused. That's why I did this.
Gary Herbst's sister Linda seemed a bit overwhelmed.
12 and a half. That does not seem very relevant to someone's life. It seems very, very light.
8 months later, Connie Herbst was back in court for her sentencing.
We also recommended for Connie the highest end of the guidelines sentence, which was 57 months.
That would have been almost 5 years in prison?
Yes.
But the judge decided Connie would get 2 years and 3 months. Under Minnesota sentencing guidelines, she served just 3 months behind bars and was released in May of 2022.
I think that he was psychotic.
And back in the small town of Elko, New Market, Minnesota, where the murder took place, a few of Gary Herbst's former neighbors had hoped Austin and his mother Connie wouldn't do any hard time for eliminating a man they considered a monster.
I felt sad because I didn't really want them to be caught.
I don't feel that they were a danger to society.
Jason Grimm even had a message for Austin.
I hope he's doing well, and when he gets out, please look us up. I'd like to help him in any way I can.
Really? Yeah.
Do you feel, in a way, though, he got a 12-and-a-half-year sentence? Was that too much?
I think it's a little bit excessive. Hopefully he can pick up the pieces and move on with his life.
Do you believe that what you did was justified?
I believe that there are a lot of reasons why the act was justifiable.
So under the same circumstances, you would still shoot him again?
I believe so.
And when you get out, what do you want people to know about whether you will be a potential danger to society or a contributor to society?
My only goal in life is to leave something behind that's worth remembering. This isn't it. This isn't it. I want to leave behind a legacy other than I killed my father.
Welcome to Postmortem. I'm 48 Hours correspondent Natalie Morales, filling in today for Anne Marie Green. And today we are discussing the case of Gary Herbst, who was reported missing by his wife in 2014. 3 years later, a dog discovered his skull in rural Wisconsin with a gunshot wound in the back of the head. Joining me today to discuss his fascinating report is 48 Hours correspondent Peter Van Sant. Thanks for joining us, Peter.
Hey, Natalie, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. And this one really was riveting.
Absolutely. And the notion that this man in rural Wisconsin, he goes out, sees his dog gnawing on something in the driveway, comes up and checks it out and sees a human skull and calls police. It was just incredible.
Now, Peter, this hour also features your exclusive interview with a convicted killer. And this is one of the most revealing conversations about a murder that I've heard here on 48 Hours.
Yeah. Over the years, I was trying to add it up. I've talked to about 19 accused killers. None of them has ever admitted it. We've had very confrontational interviews and things and gotten very close to getting them to admit. But in this case, Austin Herbst, Gary's son, not only admits it, but he gives us details, step by step, of how he murdered his own father and left his corpse in the woods for animals to eat, to destroy the evidence. He delivers that matter-of-factly, and it's chilling and yet fascinating.
So in 2017, after that dog dug up an unidentified human skull, police then went to the woods in Wisconsin. They found additional human remains there, but investigators were unable to identify the victim until 3 years later. And that's when genetic genealogists got involved, and they were able to use DNA to trace a family tree, which then led them to identifying the victim as Gary Herbst. Gary's wife, Connie, had filed a missing persons report for him back in 2014. Peter, what was her story back then?
Connie said that Gary just walked out on them, packed some clothing, took $5,000 in cash, but he left his cell phone behind. That seemed very strange. Connie said that he left in a gray Honda vehicle that was driven by an unknown person. And Connie says that she was at home, and this is important later, she was at home when Gary left her and only reported him missing when Gary's sister asked them to many months later, when there'd been a death in the family and they wanted to notify Gary. That's when they learned that he was missing, and they urged Connie to file that report.
So there was a gap in the timing from when he went missing to then when they actually reported it. And then when investigators were able to finally track down Gary's wife, Connie, and their adult son, Austin, in 2020, they said, as you did, that Gary walked out on the family 7 years earlier and described him as being volatile and abusive. But investigators were immediately suspicious about the stories that they were telling because some of the details weren't really adding up, right, Peter?
That's absolutely right. In 2020, Connie told cops she was at the library when he left, not at home. Remember her first story, she said she was at home. Also in 2020, Connie said that her .40 caliber gun had been taken, but she didn't mention anything about her pistol being taken before. And Austin's version of events changed throughout his interviews. His first police interview, he claimed a stranger picked Gary up and drove away, but in his second interview, he said the driver was a mysterious man with tattoos who was sketchy. And during a second interview, they both consented, Austin and his mother Connie, to a polygraph test. Now, Connie didn't show any signs of deception, but Austin did. And by this point, investigators had a hunch they were lying, but there was no other evidence, so they had to let Connie and Austin go, even though their instincts told them, gosh, they must have been involved in Gary's disappearance.
Well, the investigators then continue on with their work, trying to put the case together. They then go canvass the neighborhood, and that's when they were able to get clues from the neighbors who said he was a confrontational and retaliatory guy. So the neighbors, Chad and Kaya, told them back in 2013 they remembered seeing Austin and Connie scrubbing the floors in the middle of the night. They were loading large garbage bags and what appeared to be a rolled-up rug or a carpet into Gary's truck. Yet they didn't report any of this to the police. Why not, Peter?
Yeah, and Kaya recalls that when they had observed them loading up the garbage bags, her husband Chad said, Kaya, I think they finally killed him. But they were going off on a hunch since they did not see the body or any blood. They thought Gary, as the whole neighborhood did, was a horrible man and in some ways potentially dangerous. The neighbors also told investigators that, look, murder is never the answer and that no one deserves to be murdered, but they also hoped that these two would not be punished in any way because they felt Gary was just that terrible of a human being.
So they speculated from the get-go then it was Connie and Austin who killed Gary and that he didn't just walk out on the family as, Connie and Austin were telling people back then.
Yeah, it's like that scene out of The Wizard of Oz, ding dong, the witch is dead, the wicked old witch. That's the way it was in that neighborhood. And when they were watching Austin and Connie after he had disappeared, they were so happy. They were walking around with cookies and offering them to neighbors that they hadn't really spoken to much because they said Gary always kept them indoors. And neighbors also saw Austin and Connie, if you're ready for this, setting up for a yard sale. And what was for sale? Well, it was men's clothing, Gary's clothing, obviously, men's shoes, ammo boxes, tools, Gary's favorite ride-along lawnmower. And when Kaya asked Connie where Gary was, she replied, he just didn't want to be married anymore, and he left.
Yeah, but the real crack in the case was when a cadaver dog, Radar, then searched the former Herbst house in 2020 and detected the scent of human remains. Now, as a dog lover, I love that you have two dogs that really helped be the key in helping solve this case.
Yeah, the handler, Dan Moldenhauer, told us that Radar is a German Shepherd rescue from Wisconsin. And when she detects the presence of human decomposition, she will turn around, sit, and look right at Moldenhauer. And I witnessed this myself. After all these years, Radar went through the Herbst house and alerted at the very spot where the new owner said that she had seen this red stain on the floor. And at the time, Radar alerted, and when we were there, she did it again, which was really something to see. The dog also alerted at the basement sliding door that led outside, which is where, of course, the neighbors had seen the two of them bringing out bags and what appeared to be this rolled up rug, which when they were talking to each other, they thought, gosh, could there be a body inside that? And all of the areas that Radar detected were also areas where the luminol glowed. 48 hours, people know very well. You spray this chemical, luminol, it detects blood, and turn off the lights, and they put a special light that causes that chemical to glow. And all over that house, it was glowing. It looked like, Times Square, and that told them this was definitely the murder scene.
So even though, Peter, this was largely a circumstantial case back in November 2020, police then arrested Connie and Austin for Gary Herbst's murder. And when Austin was interviewed then for the fourth time, that is when he finally said he shot his father, and he alleged he did it because of years of physical and psychological abuse. Now, you, Peter, were able to sit face to face with Austin. You spoke to him at length. What was it like sitting across from him, hearing all that detail?
He was one of the most fascinating killers I have ever met, and I can call him that because he admitted to it. He was charming, articulate, intelligent, a great storyteller, and a man who spent all this time in prison. He's really thought about this story, and he has ready-made answers for whatever you ask. He believes the killing of his father was justified, and he told me without any emotion that if he could go back in time and the circumstances were the same, he'd shoot him again. He tells one story during the course of the interview that there was this bloody mess down there on the floor. We didn't put any of this in the show itself. His mother comes home and she sees it, and they were both just matter of fact about, we need to clean this up. But despite all of those years passing, Austin never came forward, remember this, to tell the truth about what had occurred inside that house until he had to, until basically he was confronted with, we know you did this. There's a really interesting exchange that I had with Austin that wasn't in the show that I want people to hear. It's about his thought process leading up to his confession, because it suggests that there was a possible cover-up here.
About 4.5 hours into the questioning, you finally do speak up and you say, I would like to tell the truth, but I need to talk to my mom first. Why did you have to talk to her? Was that to fabricate another story?
I think it was partially that. Part of my brain was thinking, well, I need to talk to my mom and, figure out what to say to get away with this. Now, later on in my life here, I think I was looking for an excuse to tell the truth. I think I was looking for a way to confess what I had done. Because even though I had had these years of happiness and freedom, it's a weight. It truly is a weight, having something like that and knowing that nobody knows.
So interesting, Peter.
Yeah, to have a discussion on how to get away with this murder. Yeah. Wow. He is a contradiction all the time. You feel sorry for him in one moment, and then in others, there's this cold calculation that's going on. So that's what makes him so fascinating.
Yeah. Well, Austin did say on the day of the murder that Gary and Connie had gotten into some sort of argument. Connie then left. He said she went to the library. Gary then fell asleep on the couch, and that's when Austin said he saw the gun under the skirt of the couch. He said that's when he sort of went into this mode where he started to fear for his life, for his mother's life. He picked up the gun, and then he shot Gary while Gary was asleep, laying on that couch. I want to play more of your interview when you grilled Austin about his actions.
What do you say that your life while he was sleeping there on the couch was not under imminent threat, and that you could have picked up the gun and left the house and gone to the police? You didn't have to shoot him. This wasn't legally self-defense. This was murder.
Correct.
What do you say to all that?
I have to refer back to, again, 18 years I've been told, if you try to have me arrested, if you try to flee, if you try to, go your own way, I will find you and kill you.
You believe, you have no doubt, in fact, that when he woke up, he would have been the one to pick up that firearm. He would have been the one to pull the trigger.
Absolutely. 100%.
Kill or be killed.
Exactly. And it's a terrible situation to have been put in. Kill my father or accept that my death is on its way.
The question I still have to this day, was it kill or be killed, or was it kill and we'll be happy the rest of our lives by eliminating this man who by many accounts was a nasty personality with a mean disposition? And he says that he suffered abuse. He's asking others to understand that he was protecting his and his mom's lives. Keep in mind, he always said, I was my mother's protector, and he really did believe she would be shot. But prosecutors said there's a lot of ways of protecting people these days, and that Austin should have picked up the gun, gone to cops. But we've seen, of course, in other cases where victims of domestic abuse did all the right steps, and they still ended up being killed by their abusers. Prosecutors argued, however, you can't let someone off easy for murder just because they claim that they were abused, or else anyone could say that. And as they told me off camera, we could have 1 million people murdered a year if that was a legitimate basis for killing someone.
Welcome back. Now, Austin Herbst claimed that he shot his father, Gary, after he alleges Gary abused him and his mother for years. But Peter, despite all those allegations, did police ever get any reports of abuse, or did family members become aware of any such claims of abuse?
Prosecutors say there was no reported evidence of abuse, and that the first time Austin and Connie talk about abuse is after Gary's body is identified and a murder investigation is launched. And Gary's, the victim's sister, Linda, and her husband hung out with them many, many times before there was this sort of breakup in the family. And they never saw any evidence of abuse, not a bruise, not a scratch, a cut. In fact, Linda's husband was a veteran cop of 30 years, trained to look for signs of abuse. And he said whenever he saw Austin and his father, Gary, together, that it was a loving relationship and they had a great time together. But remember, and this is important, Linda was estranged from Gary and hadn't seen him for years. And over time, who knows, the abuse may have gotten worse.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, the other side of that, Peter, we know with domestic abuse victims that they usually suffer in silence, or they fear that if they tell someone, the abuse will just get worse for them.
And psychological abuse, well, you can't necessarily see it, that it doesn't give you bruises or a black eye. So this is what's made my head spin around during the course of this investigation, and it spins to this day.
You raised the issue with Austin. We have a little bit more of your exchange.
Prosecutors also say that there is no what they call real evidence that either you or your mother were ever physically abused by Gary. You never called police. You didn't seek help from the court system. You didn't seek help from any social agencies. And what do you say to that?
For as many abuse cases that are reported to police, for as many people who contact them and receive restraining orders against other people due to domestic abuse and violence, I don't know the statistics, but I can guarantee you there are just as many that go unreported. Not everybody has the freedom or the courage or the ability to call the cops, to receive a restraining order.
Why didn't you ever share with a friend, my father is abusing me and my mother, we fear him? They could find no one to back up your story.
I had to hide it. I had attempted to when I was younger, and it brought me either being bullied because I was a weird child, or just apathy. Wasn't their problem. And I mean, I'm talking kindergarten, first, second grade. As a child, I was like, okay, nobody cares, so I'll just keep this to myself.
It's a compelling story. I can't tell you that it is untrue. It's just as prosecutors who are suspicious about all this say, it only came out when their lives were on the line, and this was the only defense in the prosecutors' minds that they could put forward that in some ways would create sympathy for them, and the notion that they had was that could lead to a lesser sentence.
You then asked Austin how he and his mother, Connie, decided to dispose of Gary's body. I want to play a little bit more of your interview. This part didn't make it into the hour.
We drive for, I'd say, about 2.5 hours. I start taking county roads, and there is almost like a square of forest and then a field.
And then you try to dig a hole, a grave?
Yeah.
What happens?
In the process of doing so, cars, I can still see the lights on the road of vehicles that pass by. And I saw a vehicle go by, and I heard the vehicle slow down. So at that point, I got nervous, and I went back to the car. I figured that wildlife would take care of the rest.
What do you mean, wildlife take care of the...
Bears, foxes, they would devour the body, the bones would be scattered. Nobody would know.
That seems a bit barbaric.
Absolutely. I was not in a state of mind that I ever want to revisit. I was at the lowest I'd ever been, both in my emotions and in my humanity.
Dump the body so animals would eat him. And he says it so matter-of-factly, even now, there's no emotion behind those words. He's like he's delivering a report. It became, in a way, the perfect cover-up. Evidence is in the stomach of beasts. And they also ended up getting rid of other evidence. According to Austin, after they returned home, they cut up the couch into pieces because there was blood all over the couch. And they put the pieces in plastic bags and placed them in Gary's truck along with the rug. That's the stuff that the neighbors believe actually saw, and drove to a campsite where he and his mother burned the remaining evidence. They also disposed of the gun used to kill him in a lake that was nearby. And after the murder, they did everything possible to cover up what they had done. They lied to cops. And I said to him, that's what criminals do. And he says, yeah, that is.
And did they ever tell you if they thought at all to call the cops and to claim even that they did this in self-defense instead of, trying to cover up what was a murder?
Yeah, I was a little surprised by this. Austin said that he and his mother didn't call the police because they believe that cops are evil. Austin told me that he was made to feel scared that if he did call the cops, he would be locked away for life. So they lied to cops for years.
Let's talk more about Connie Herbst because she pleaded guilty to aiding an offender, an accomplice after the fact. She was sentenced to 2 years, 3 months without a trial, but under Minnesota sentencing guidelines, Connie ended up serving just 3 months behind bars. She was released in May of 2022. Now, in your interview with Austin, Peter, you raised the prosecutor's speculation about whether Connie might have actually been the one to have shot Gary Herbst. And that Austin, as he said, he was always his mother's protector. Was he perhaps the one who was then taking the fall for it?
Yeah, the prosecution really wanted to cross-examine Connie to challenge her about her story if she was at the house or at the library. But because she took this plea deal, she didn't go to trial, and they never got that chance. And of course, we asked Connie for an interview, and she turned us down.
Well, Austin ultimately pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, and in 2021, a judge sentenced him to 12 years and 6 months. Now, Austin will be eligible for release in 2029. Peter, were you at all surprised by the sentence?
Yes, there's discretion with the judge. She heard his story, and people who've listened to this podcast, you get a sense of this young man, the intelligence. You don't sense there's some demonic, threatening thing in his personality. She believed his story of abuse. The prosecution, honestly, was flabbergasted by how light a sentence was given to both Connie and Austin. And consider this, in addition to the murder, Connie and Austin, they'd obstructed an investigation. They lied to police officers. That's a crime. They desecrated a corpse. And you would have thought those things would have been reflected in the length of their sentences, but it was not.
But as you report, Peter, which was so fascinating, is hearing from the neighbors again who, they hated Gary Herbst. And they were actually hoping that Connie and Austin would have to serve no time. They didn't want them to do any hard time. I don't think we ever hear people being that empathetic and supportive to defendants in a case of murder.
Yeah, the neighbors, the former neighbors, were very supportive of the two of them. One said that she thinks Austin's sentence is too much time and that it's wrong considering the abuse. And another neighbor felt that Austin's actions were justified,
And he even offered to help him when he gets out. He told me I might offer him a job. And they felt the Austin they got to know was not a threat to society in any way.
Well, one can hope that he's learned a lot from this experience and having the time to think about his actions. But thank you again for great reporting and for joining us.
Thanks, Natalie.
And thank you all for listening. Now, if you like this podcast, please rate and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.